Hey guys, welcome to another Behind the Screen. So today's topic, we are going to be talking about the balance between story and combat. So what do I mean by that? I'm talking about the fact that when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or you're playing a role-playing game, often there is a disconnect between the storytelling aspects of the game, the role-playing aspects of the game, the dungeon master sharing the beautiful world that they have created or that they are reading from their module book, and the battle, the combat, the fight against the monster. And so those two very different aspects are something that you have to find balance between. And as I've been playing and DMing more and more, I'm seeing that there continues to be a disconnect from these two things. Now, I'm not sure that I have solutions, but it's definitely a topic I wanted to talk about because the things that I've done to try to improve upon it, I don't know if they're working, and it just always helps to talk things out. So one criticism that I have about D&D is definitely this lack of balance between these two parts of the game. The storytelling is always so fun and fluid and beautiful, and you're painting a picture and you're really setting a scene for the players to inhabit. And your players are hopefully role-playing and they are participating in the world around them, whether that's meeting shopkeeps and buying things, or making political treaties with other folks high up in the nobles district. Who knows what potential role-playing storytelling aspects you can include. And I have had games that are entirely role-playing because we just never got to a battle. On the flip side, you have battle, which is initiative-based, numbers-based, you have far more rolls. People are trying to count stats and then roll damage dice. You, as the DM, you're managing monsters, you're comparing numbers for armor classes. There's a whole lot more bookkeeping involved in combat. And it can seem very daunting to mesh those two things together. And again, like I said before, I don't think I have the perfect answer. It really depends on your players. I think that's what I've found, because they're two very different parts of the game. And if you have players who really like the storytelling and the role-playing, you're going to want to pull as much as you can of that into your combat, into your battle. Whereas if you have players who are very battle-focused, you're stuck with this. You can't really add more battle in. I mean, I guess you could, but you can't really add battle into storytelling. Now, one of the ways that I can see that you can get around that is if they really like numbers and they like rolling their dice, you can have challenges, whether that's arm wrestling or games of chance or things built in that create more opportunities for there to be skill rolls or skill checks or things where they're having to work. However, it is not quite as satisfying to do really well at a hand of cards as it is to kill a goblin in D&D. So sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. It's definitely harder to pull that aspect in. The RP, the storytelling, that can be very rich and complex, and I think battle can also be very rich and complex. It just is far more strategic. So one of the things that I try to do when I play is, or when I DM, I should say, is to try to bring storytelling aspects into battle to make it feel a little bit more balanced and a little less sort of off kilter when it happens. So whether that's describing how the battle is starting, laying out the ground for where all of the enemies are. You have multiple levels, you're describing the terrain, you're describing where, I had my group fight a bunch of kobolds underneath the mountains, and they were in an altar room where there was an upper level and a lower level, and they were all attacking at the same time. So being able to describe the broken pews that made out of stone, the rubble that's laying around, part of the altar had collapsed and had been sort of put back together with string and twine and canvas, and then part of the upper balcony, the stone was broken there, and so there was a little bit of cover up there for some of the kobolds and others. Like being able to describe some of these things adds to the role-playing storytelling experience, but you're also in the middle of battle. The other thing that I've found that is very helpful is when you actually describe the action that is happening. So let's say your ranger shoots at a kobold. the ranger, you say, you pull back your bow, you shoot, you fire, and then you wait for them to roll, and whether or not their roll succeeds, you can describe the action of their arrow, whether that is, it pings off the stone and flies off into the distance, or it sinks straight into their shoulder, and they take, and you wait for them to say how many points of damage they take. So being able to incorporate that sense of you're still being a storyteller, you're just waiting for their dice in order to determine how much story you're telling, really can add a lot to it. You're not going to do that for every roll, though. It can be very exhausting, especially for you as the DM. You can be very focused on trying to make sure that your the creatures that you're running are doing the things that they should be doing. Are they following their own motivations? You're balancing a lot, and that is one of the more challenging aspects of it. The thing that I definitely think is fun is that when a baddie dies, you can describe or ask the players to describe what happens to them. The very much Matthew Mercer, how do you want to do this moment? When the big bad goes down, they can say how they want to do it, and then you can elaborate on it and describe it. Now, the reason that this idea or this topic came into my head is because recently someone told me, Emma, you're very violent when you describe what happens. It's kind of gory. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Lots of like eyeballs exploding and like arrows shooting into people, or like intestines falling out when someone gets knifed. Maybe I should probably cut back on that. It was a nice moment of check yourself before you gross your players out. I think I was looking to add the story so much, and I was so anxious about making sure the story was still involved, that I overcorrected, and I kind of got too intense when it came to it, because while the rest of the storytelling is fine, it doesn't usually involve intestines. Usually. So being able to pull myself back just a little bit and describe it a little less sort of viscerally might be helpful in the future. That being said, there is still always going to be that moment where when a battle starts, you say, all right, guys, I need you to roll initiative. And that is a really big signal to the players that this is now the other part of the game. And there are some players who this is the part they've been waiting for the whole time. They're not role players. They're not in it necessarily for the more story aspects. They're in it for the moment when they get to roll a natural 20 and do double damage on the monster. That's what they're there for. And so being able to make sure you're catering to them as well may mean that you're going to make a few more small encounters and include them in your session than you would have if you have a very large role-playing group. I'm fortunate, I have a lot of role players in my group, but I also try to balance it because we do have a couple people who would rather fight. So being able to add in those smaller little skirmishes means that no one's going to get exhausted, but they're going to still have that taste, that thing. And I've been trying to become more cognizant of that as I'm building out sessions. The sessions that I run are typically epically long, like between 7 and 12 hours. So I know that I need to have X number of encounters in there with them probably resting at least once during the game. That long resting, I mean, that way they can get spell slots and things like that back, as well as hit points. But just being conscientious about that and making sure that I'm including the players who are not role players, I think is also a good way to make sure you're balancing. And also by adding little skirmishes, they're not necessarily detracting from the story if they are part of the story. So let's say you're doing a dungeon delve. That's usually the easiest way to incorporate smaller skirmishes. You're doing a dungeon delve, okay, they run into a gelatinous cube. Okay, the next thing they run into is a carrion crawler. The next thing they run into is a pair of basilisks. Like, that all can happen in the space of one session, and it can all happen back to back, but at the same time in between, they're discovering clues, they're figuring out the puzzle, and so it creates that sense of balance between. I think one of the things that's going to be coming soon, I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out anything that the video I made about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I'm interested to see when it comes out if it's going to do what I think it's going to do, which is it's going to try to merge even more that gap between the RP, or the storytelling, and the battle. I think the way that they're tracking initiative and and doing things is going to be more story based. We shall see. It's a gamble. We're still trying to learn the best way to do this game, and as RPGs, especially D&D and Pathfinder, start to evolve more, and we're in a very different era than we were even 5 years ago with tabletop RPGs. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how they start to meld these two things together, because right now we're making do, and we're looking for stopgap methods to make it feel less disjointed, but eventually it will come a point where it will be cohesive and it will feel like one thing. And whether that's more rolling for things in story aspect or less rolling for things in battle, I'm not sure. But I'm excited to find out. I am, because it is one cohesive story when you're the DM and you're planning it. It is just sometimes doesn't feel like it when you're actually sitting around the table and you're like, okay, battle! And everyone like sits back and they're like, okay, I don't have to do anything for like 5 minutes now because it's going to take a while to get around to my turn. And you as a DM, you're like, no, prep what you're going to do. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever, and they don't. But yeah, I think it is going to be really interesting to sort of see the evolution of these two halves that make the whole that is the RPG that we love change over time. So anyway, I think that's going to be it for this particular topic. However, I do have one small side story from the table that I wanted to share this week. Obviously, you guys know I play a lot of role-playing games. I had something very interesting happen this past Wednesday in my Tomb of Annihilation game. The character that I play, her name is Lydia, and she is a halfling ranger. We are now actually in the Tomb of Annihilation, and we were exploring, and she saw a fountain of clear bubbling water and she decided to take a drink of it. She's not very smart, so this was a in-character choice. It didn't seem like it was trapped, and it seemed like it smelled good. She's a ranger, she knows these sorts of things. Well, she drank it and turned into a boy. And no one in our party has greater restoration yet because it is technically a curse. But now she's a boy, and I'm having a very exciting opportunity to play a transgender character in Dungeons & Dragons, which is something that I never thought would have ever happened, and I am really actually pretty excited about it. I think it would have been a funny footnote if Lydia had been turned back into a girl immediately. And keep in mind, she did actually try to drink the water again to see if it would turn her back. Instead, she took 25 points of necrotic damage. But yes, so Lydia is now a boy, and I've been thinking really hard about it. I want to be very thoughtful about the way that I do this, but I want to play her still as her. She just is in a male body now, and that is totally fair and legit, and I am excited to see how people in the game, NPCs or PCs, react to her, but in male form. And it's been interesting so far because there's technically only two other women in the game other than my character, and I think it's going to affect character dynamics in a really interesting way. So anyway, so that's my side story, is that my character became a boy this past week. Physically a boy, not mentally. And yeah, so fun story, just bonus story. But that's going to be it. So if you have any comments about the topic, how do you bridge the gap between story and combat? Please write them in the comments below. I love reading your comments, actually. You guys have such good ideas and you've done so many interesting things. It is like a wealth of knowledge down there in the comments section. I love it. But yeah, that is going to be it for today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, get the word out there that there's good D&D talk on the internet. And it's not all people who have been doing it for the last 30 years, and some of us are girls too. And you can support us on Patreon if you are so inclined. And yeah, I think that's going to be it today. I guess I'll see you guys on the next adventure. Bye!